One of the things that I talk about, in fact the main focus of most of my work, is helping people think about the workplace of the future. Now that isn't in the sense sort of magical thinking. I'm not trying to come up with sci-fi futures for companies to think about, but what I'm asking them to think about is trends and changes that are happening in plain sight that I think companies need to think about. Now, one of those things is about decision making. Now, it sounds slightly technical, but it's not. It's something called false binaries. Now, what that means is that quite often organisations and individuals actually, for a number of reasons, and we can think about that later, but are given choices. So they can either do this market or they can do that market. So they have a choice to make. And my challenge to that, and I do mention this in the context of relationships as well, but in another place, but my challenge to that is, it says who? Why does it have to be that choice or that choice? Aren't there any points in between? So the best example that has somewhat been overspoken about, but nevertheless it is a pretty good example, is what happened here in the UK in the last, well, it feels like 10 years, but it's only really 5 or 6 years I think it's been bubbling, but this thing called Brexit, where the UK political class was talking about whether or not we should continue being part of the European Union. Now, we were then, a couple of years ago, given the option of staying in the EU or leaving the EU. And at the time, the country went completely EU mad, Brexit crazy, and everybody was talking about it, and it was really polarised. I mean, you had primarily on the right, people saying that we need to take back our country, take back our markets. I mean, don't know what back from or back to, but anyway, that's what they were saying. And then primarily on the left, you had people saying, oh no, we need to be staying with the EU because it's better being in a collective, etc, etc. So there were really opposing perspectives on this. I, at the time, couldn't get my head around it, and I don't know how people did. It was so complex that I'm not sure anybody particularly understood it, and I certainly didn't, and I'm not even going to begin to claim that I did. And then people voted on it, and I was watching this, and I think, how can people vote? I mean, it's so complicated. It's in the realms of the expert economists, and then you had Jeannie from Facebook being an expert on Brexit, etc. So anyway, I don't want this to be a Brexit discussion, but I believe that was a false binary. We didn't have to be in or out. We could have done something else. And one of the things that I think is helpful in this context is how you frame a question, or how you consider a choice. It doesn't always have to be binary. And a really simple example that my other half talks about is when we're talking about going on holiday. So say we're thinking, well, we're going to go to Scarborough and we're going to go to Paris. Which one are we going to choose? Which one are we going to choose? And she always says, well, wait a minute, let's put an and in there. How can we work out, how can we manage a way so we can go to Scarborough and Paris, not simply go to one or the other? Now I know that's a trivial example, but I think nevertheless it's quite useful, because reframing choice out with the bounds of what I've referred to earlier as false binaries can be really, really helpful. So rather than having product discussions about how you're going to change to a new product, you could be talking about how you can proliferate and do different products. So just have a think about that. And I'd be interested in your views. Is this something that we've been just programmed to do? I think the media probably have a lot to answer for here. Is something good or bad, rather than looking for the good or the good and the bad within a particular circumstance or organisation. So I think false binaries are something, they're all around you. You might start looking for them now and pick up the newspaper, look at comments about even media stars. It all tends to be polarised. You'll have of a false boundary is happening around us right now. Now obviously I'm getting like you, I'm getting bombarded by the media about the impact of the COVID pandemic, and people are talking about, it's interesting, this is the first time or the most obvious thing that's united everybody across the globe. Certainly in my lifetime it is. And there are people talking about supply chains and how they're breaking down. They're talking about how complex it is getting simple things like food. And they're raising questions about it. They're saying, okay, maybe what we should be doing is thinking much more locally, and having our own local supply chains, so that we're protecting ourselves from these sorts of global issues that come along every now and again. Again, I think that is a false binary, because there's two things there. One is it might not be possible to provide what a community needs locally, although again I'm a strong proponent of the sort of local idea, but we are not going to solve some of the existential challenges that we face at the moment by being local. So for example, climate change will not be solved only by local communities taking responsibility. That can only be part of the equation. It needs to be part of a bigger thing. I think issues with artificial intelligence need a global perspective. I think local governments taking, and when I say local I mean country governments taking decisions about AI is good, but I don't think it's going to be manageable properly unless there's a global approach. And there are several other things, and I think the COVID thing is a classic example. Are we really going to want to go like this in the future, where you have one country could perhaps hold the rest of the world to ransom if it finds the vaccine for COVID? Is that really what we want? I think we need a global perspective on this. So again, I think the answer is not a false binary. It's not going for the local economy or global economy. It's going for a mixed economy, which recognises there are some things that are better done locally than are done globally. So it might mean that the sort of monoculture approach towards producing food might be something that we want to see less of, but the approach towards managing the implications, ethical and moral implications of artificial intelligence, the impact on the job opportunities for humans, might be a global issue. So I think we need something that does both. There's a really naff word I came across quite a few times in my job as a consultant. That was glocal. So you have an aspect of global and local. I think that's probably a step too far, but it might make sense intellectually, if nothing else.